I got this plastic shield here that'll keep you all protected. So hopefully you don't mind me taking off the mask right here. This demo Ron wrote up is going to be a surprise for you. Well, it's all about finishing. It's how to finish wood, how we proceed on this. We're going to work out some coloring. We're going to work out some oils. We're going to work out a little paint. So the thing about this demo, I've done it before in Pittsburgh. I need participation from all of you. Because I was informed this morning from my wife, I don't know it all. So just that. So as we start out with this, finishes are oil's pretty safe, but it still gives an odor. Lacquers start filling in your lungs. There's solvents in here. So we have to protect ourselves from finishes. And first thing off, everybody goes through here, it's splattered. So eye protection is like one of the most important parts of finish. I don't know if anybody's got a little finish splashed in their eye before, but it's not pleasant, especially when it comes down to lacquer thinner, alcohol, anything along those lines. Those solvents really burn the eye. If that happens, flush, water, lots of water, flush it out of your eyes real quick. So you know, one of the things in here, as we're working with this, you should have a bottle of water drinking, getting into your system. Secondly, rubber gloves. As we go through this finish, we always get it on our hands. I was painting last night. You could see paint on my hands, so I didn't even follow my rules. But these rubber gloves, Harbor Freight, super cheap, and they're pretty strong because these are the 7 mil. Yeah. So they hold up quite well. And thirdly, as we go through here, even when we wood turn, we have choices of different masks. Sawdust is the one thing we produce. So a cloth mask, paper mask, all those things prevent the dust going in our lungs. But as we start working with solvent bases and solvents, you're going to need something a little more, especially when you start spraying. You can get the regular mask with 2 organic filters, and that filters out the fumes so you don't have to breathe that in. I use a lot of catalyzed finishes. So if I'm spraying, the overspray and mist in the air will basically coat my lungs, harden, and then it's kind of hard to breathe. So I use this apparatus, and I'm using 2 carbon filters, forced air, so I can basically spray and not even smell a thing. This is a Sentinel XL with a 3M helmet. They were going really inexpensive on eBay, and then as soon as the pandemic hit, they went skyrocket. There's another wool unit like this, but it has a HEPA filter. It'll be great just for sawdust, but it's not going to filter your fumes. These canisters I pick up from McMaster Car, and a set of 3 costs me $180. And then I throw them over and get some new ones. But as you can see, I even use this for particulates. I take a vacuum cleaner to it, but still, that's how much residue I still have in it. So they do get clogged. So again, cover up. Solvents get absorbed through your skin. Last time I checked, skin is porous. So you start working with any type of finish with your hands, it's going to get absorbed. You know, everybody's like, oh, I want to take my oil finish and I want to rub it into that wood real nice. So the heat of my hand goes into that. Some of these have solvents that will build up into you. So you can get as much heat through a rubber glove as you can with the palm of your hand. and you don't have to wash your hands as much. Okay, so why do we finish a piece of wood? You know, you have to ask yourself, well, you know, this piece of wood is absolutely beautiful. Why would we want to finish it? Well, one reason is we want to make it very protective, so it's sanitary. If we want to put fruit on this, something leaches through, wood is porous. So we're going to add bacteria to this, grime, bugs, they're going to all start going in here and growing. So by sealing this up, we make it sanitary. It allows everything to be somewhat food safe. You know, everybody goes like, "Wow, is a food safe finish?" Any finish cured within the time that it takes is food safe. If all the solvents are out of it, all the oils are dry, it's food safe. Now, if you have a buildup, you want little chips to that finish going out. So you want to know how thick your finish is. You don't want it to chip off. You don't want to sit there and take a cutting board, put a nice coat of gloss finish over it, and then start cutting it, and then little pieces of the finish fly off. So use your discretion. The other thing is we put a finish on it to stabilize the wood. As itself, it's dry outside right now because it's cold. The moisture level goes way down in the house. Everything starts to shrink up. Summertime, the humidity's in there, it starts to grow. So everything, by sealing this, we're preventing moisture from going into the wood. That prevents any checking, any cracks, any warpage, and it just keeps everything stabilized. Third reason we put a finish on this is we want to show what's going on in the wood. We want to decorize. We want to color it. We have a choices of this pepper. I had to guess what it was. Wouldn't look like a pepper if it was just cherry. The yellow, the green stem, all of a sudden it identifies as a pepper. If we take this one here, the oil brings out all the grain. So we just turn it and you can see the grain change colors and directions in that. So the finish brings that out. It allows us to have different objects that come into that. So the big thing that comes out of this now, you could do anything you want for your finish, but we need to have the wood prepped. And it's as simple as that. And the more you sand, the better it'll look. It's as simple as that. This has some warps in it into here. So it's important to eliminate the scratches. Now, I don't know if anybody looked at this, but there's tear out here. There's tear out on the end grain. There's a little bit of warpage into here. So I use a lot of power sanding while it's rotating, because if this rotates and you start putting a piece of sandpaper to this, all you're getting is serrations of these lines. So where the straight grain is, looks really good. End grain over in here. So I will literally stop the lathe and sand that end grain out. Going on ways of sanding, we can spin this on the lathe and sand. We have to move the sandpaper as we go. But I'm going to sand this and you guys can pass it around. That's the area I'm sanding. And if you look right in this area, I'll circle it. You can see where the scratches are. Now this is all end grain here, and I'm not going to touch. I guess I could. So I sanded here. This is where I didn't sand. And this is where I sanded here. And this is where it's not sand. So you can see some of the scratches and rip outs and tears. Look over in here. When I go through a lot of these parts as preparation, depending on the finish I use, and not to get into oil finishes, I will coat this with oil, let it dry. I will literally sand everything off again because the oil will raise the grain, show the imperfections, and basically gives you a roadmap. The platter is sitting down right over there. I think I coated that 6 times before I was satisfied getting all the scratches out. And Chuck's been over my house and he'll go, "Oh, what do you think?" And he goes, "Oh, I think it's good." I'm like, "No." So he sands and resands and sands again. I use oils that dry. So part of that reason is to have a surface, let it dry, then you can sand it pretty much right back to the wood. So it depends on which oil you use. Danish oil does not dry. I use Waterlocks. There's a couple other ones out there. When we get into oil finishes, we can discuss that a little more. So if you notice, I have several DA, dual action sanders. As you look at these sanders, they rate them on the amount of circle it travels. You can get some that do 3/16 circles, and then all of a sudden you have circles all over your bowl. This one's about a 16, and it's variable speed. I use this for Corian, so that's why I have a couple. But plus this one's variable speed. It'll slow right down or speed right up. But as the rules go, we sand slow, turn fast. Now, grits of sandpaper. How many people think 60 grit sandpaper is a wood turning tool? So as we go through these grits, we practice as a wood turner to do turning without sanding. So that platter where you don't see any sanding done, that's strictly tool. So I did that quick as a demo. I didn't want it to sand. So I've been really working on tool control. So when I started out sanding, I start at about 150 and drop to a 180. And then when I start polishing, 180, 320 to get those scratches out. If you have to start at 60 to get you a shape and then keep going through the grits, chances are you're not going to get those scratches out that were 60. Then the other aspect that comes into this, and I know Nathan's really good about this, once the bowl is off or anything along those lines, we need to come back in here and straight line it. And that's running with the grain. That will allow everything to go with the grain and the scratches disappear. If anybody thinks they could just sand a bowl on a lathe, take it off, and think life is good, they're not taking that next step. I've seen bowls over here. The cake is wonderful. The icing is a little, I've been there where I thought I turned this beautiful bowl, everything along those lines. And you start putting a finish on it. You're just like, what did I do wrong? So take the time and make the frosting as good as the cake. Because the finish accentuates any bad surface that you leave in. So it means a little hand sanding, a little polishing, working into there. It all works out better for you. The finer grit sandpaper you go, the more polished your bowl is going to look. If you finished it, you sanded to 150, 120, and you try to put a high gloss finish on it, it's still going to be about a 40 sheet. So the wood has to be prepared enough to take that high gloss finish. Again, look at the flaws, put a little water on it, anything that's going to bring out those marks for you. Now, water will swell the wood, let it dry, sand it again. If you're sanding a bowl, you're turning it this way, all your cuts are going this way, put it in reverse. Turn the bowl in reverse, sand in that direction. Anything to eliminate as much of these marks as you possibly can. Different grits of sandpaper. It's called sandpaper because they use sand. Now, does the sand make the best sandpaper? No. You get aluminum oxide, that works very well. I think they're using aluminum oxide in this Arbornet. That cuts very well. You want things, sand will actually leave particles in your wood. The aluminum oxide is going to leave particles in wood. So you want to sand down to where the particles are very minimal and then brush everything off really well so you get a good finish. So the big thing on this, I have this set up with the vacuum cleaner. It literally is all dust. So I don't have to, I still wear the mask and everything, but it still eliminates a lot. Now on sanders, I have a 2-inch disc, I have a 3-inch disc, I have circular balls, I have this one and 6, and I also have a 5. So you can work in the radiuses. I've turned green, and at that point in time, if you're turning really thin, you can sand it, and the sand actually heats up and dries the wood. So you're working out that way. Cowboy hats are a perfect example of that. As you're sanding that surface, but you're still going to have to do a final sanding after you work through this out, waiting it to dry completely. But one of the things, if you're working with green wood and you're sanding that, you're going to have to put a sealer on it. Even when the wood's wet, it's going to give you a white finish in some of the area where the water is still left. But you have to put that on there to slow down the drying, or you're still going to get cracking. Unless you have it so uniform and it's not an issue. But still, after it's dry, you still have to do a finish sanding, right? The question is, can I sand too fine? You literally can take all the way to 4,000 grit sandpaper on wood, and it will burnish the wood so it almost feels like there's a finish on it. So the answer, if you want to achieve that look, and I've seen a bowl that was totally raw with no finish, but it was burnished all the way down to like 1,500, 2,000. It's a stellar look. But going back to that first whole thing about stabilization, you're still going to let moisture in that. I don't know how it looked after a year. The question is, if we sand too far, we don't get the penetration of the sealer into the wood. And it is exactly right. You can go through here and you can sand 100, 120, 150, 180, 220, and I could put a color stain across it. The 120 would be super dark, and the 220 is going to be light, just because the stain doesn't penetrate into the wood. So it'd be the same thing with the finish. That comes down to, this was a soft area here, and you can see the rim all of a sudden went shallow. It's also true of your end grain face grain. So as you're sanding this and you're thinking you're going to get those scratches out of the end grain, you're going to start wearing off your side grain completely. So all of a sudden, this is getting thinner, this is getting thinner, the end grain's not getting rid of its scratches. That's why I stop that bowl and start sanding here on the end grain. Or you're going to just get oblong bowls. It's really true of softwood where you're going to have that big problem. So you want to watch that and control what's going on. If you think you can get rid of scratches on end grain by spinning the bowl and keep sanding, it ain't going to happen. Okay, so here we are. How do we apply the finish? Rag, paintbrush, splat it, dip it in there, everything that goes in here. So we have applications of what we can do. Trusty old paintbrush. I'll tell you my little story of history on this. I was a boat carpenter back in 85. So 1981, I was a boat carpenter. And we did wood boats and old Chris Craft's lap strike. And the person that told me, he goes, "You know how to use a paintbrush?" And I said, "No." Because I wanted to learn exactly what's going on in the paintbrush. So a paintbrush, everybody kind of dips it in and they do this. So if you want to apply paint, the paint gets applied by laying the brush down, and then we cross strike with the bristles, and then we straight line. So you can do that. Oil makes it easy because that just absorbs into the wood. Paint's a whole different another subject of how this goes, but the bristles start up into there. So oil, most of the time, I just either rag, sponge brush, or just a regular brush like this. You basically flood everything on the bowl. Oil, you put excess on. You just dump it on. It's going to absorb really heavy into the end grain. The face is going to puddle up. You let it sit for a little bit, then you wipe it off. Don't want the pools building up onto this because it makes little shiny spots. And oil is just that. It has dryers, but it's a slow cure. The other way we could do this is what's called pad. And we're going to sit there and ball this up, and that's our pad. We can apply it just like that. You can apply any finish by padding. When you get into this, that goes into French polishing. You pat it in there and you work the pad. Do the same thing on while a spindle is turning or a bowl's turning. You're working that and patting it in. And then we have aerosol cans. The thing about aerosol cans, they have solids in here, but the solids have to be so thinned out so they can get it through that little nozzle. So this has about 7 or 8% solids. What I mean by that is that means 92% of this is just solvent. So it means you have to coat, 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 coat. This right here is Mohawk. This is a heavy body sanding sealer. It changes the color of the wood because it is a lacquer. Rick uses water base. Mike Nathel uses walnut oil. That doesn't change the color of the wood all that much. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit, sand it a little bit, hit it with a little more finish so you can see what goes on. So this is a heavy body sanding sealer. Sanding sealers, basically you can take clear finish, put baby powder in it, mix it up, brush it on, and will seal up and it will sand very easily. So if you really want a cheap way of putting heavy body sanding sealer, is just baby powder. Hopefully I'm not smelling everything out. The other way is a spray gun. I should have cleaned it before I came. This is a HVLP, means high volume, low pressure. When you're using a spray gun, there's a big rule of eights. 8 inches away from the product, an 8-inch fan. We're going to overlap 50%, spreading it from there. I use a 3M system. I'm only showing this, kind of expensive. This liner goes in, cap on top. This is already screened. Comes across. Then this locks into here. I'm ready to spray. You can take this upside down, suck all your air out, and then you can spray it any direction you want. What I like about this system, I usually keep lacquer thinner in one of these, so I always have my gun clean. And then I could always just change out canisters, sanding sealer to top coat, different sheens. Even though I'm using catalyzed, I can usually keep it for 4 days. Then it cures up like a rock. Okay, so the different finishes. Oil finish. The oil finish I have on this is water locks. And I'm going to go back into this book. I should have mentioned this. This book right here is very complete on how you want to finish. It goes through sanding, oil, all the different oil finishes, all your lacquers, all your shellacs, and it is a wealth of knowledge in one book. And it's easy to read, very explanatory of what goes on. So I'm going to go back in here because there's some things, because you were asking about Danish oil. I use water locks. I guess I should have tagged these when I went through here. Bob Flexner. The question was, who is the author of Understanding Wood Finishing? They will go through all the issues with problems with your finish, what you want to go, if you have fisheye. There's a whole section on shellac, dissolving the crystals with. So rubbing an oil finish on wood increases penetration. 2 things happen on this. Going back onto your oil, as you rub your hand there, heating up the oil, it's going to make the oil dry faster, which means it limits the amount of penetration you have. So you really want to just let that oil just soak in and then sand it after to clean it up. I'm looking for the different oils. So Wacko Danish oil and Waterlock Original are the same type of finish. They're totally different. Wacko is a mixture of oil and varnish, so it never hardens. Basically, it sits on the wood, penetrates it, allows anything to go in back into that. Now, it's going to repel some water because there's some oil in there, but it's not really ever drying. So this goes back to your question, why the oil was gumming up your sandpaper, because it's not dry. Water locks, on the other hand, is made of varnish. They say, oh, it's tung oil. Well, it's thinned down varnish. So you can literally take varnish, and if that looks like it has some tung oil in it, thin it out, and you have a penetrating oil. That will dry and react the same as most of your oils that you think you're using. He makes a really good argument that he went through and he went all the oils and found out most of them didn't have tung oil in them, even though they said they. So the water locks is made by cooking in oil and resin so it cures hard. It can be built up in coats into the wood. I like it because it has lots of dryers. And I can go through here, sand it, and I literally make the surface of the wood the finish. So I don't have a heavy buildup or anything along those lines. So you get to see what's there. I'm not masking it by any deep gloss or anything along those lines, but that's my choice. What you want to do on your bowl is your personal choice. There is no right or wrong, and that's why I'm letting you guys ask the question, share your experiences, because everybody does something different. Again, the way to put oil on, padding, brush, everything along those lines. What's nice about an oil finish, you can fix it. It's already on top of this wood. You can sand out a scratch, re-oil it, and chances are in a week, you'll never know it was there. But I had a table out of what was back called Swedish oil. And my wife burned a red candle on top of the surface of the table, and the wax dripped. And in the middle of the table was nice red splotches that penetrated right through the finish. So it's not as protective as a lacquer or a shellac, because that will prevent that color dye from in. And let's go right into oil, and then we're going to put wax on it. That adds more to the finish. One, it brings out luster in the wood. Two, it's another layer of protection. So it doesn't allow the water penetrate in, some of those things, but it still doesn't prevent your wife doing nail polish removal. Her comment was the fact that I did not use coasters on my table to protect myself. So there's a variety of oil finishes here. He's going through with raw linseed oil, protection is pore, sheen is satin. It's easy to apply, cost is low, it darkens the wood, and it has deep penetration. Boiled linseed, again, pour right across, just about the same as raw linseed oil. Pure tung oil, pour until you have 4 or 5 coats of reduction. It darkens a little bit, deep penetration. A polymerized oil, excellent buildup, high gloss, easy on small surfaces. And then a wiping varnish, which is often solid market as an oil, has excellent buildup, gloss finishes, and that goes into more like a water locks in buildup. So wax finishes. Most of the time on a wax finish, one of the problems is, if you know, on walnut, you put wax on walnut, it fills the pores, and then you have this white haze over everything. That's why they make chocolate paste wax. So I don't have a chocolate paste wax with me, but I use this tree wax, and I also use a bowling bowling alley wax that works real well. And I will demonstrate the Be-All system, which uses a pure carnauba wax a little later. So for bowl people, I don't know how many people use the Be-All system, but I will go, yeah. I won't go over too much on the paste wax, but as the oil goes through in here, we're going to wax the surface to protect it. Now, as we go in here, we got an oil finish on this, and everybody's like, well, how do you treat it? How do you protect? Keep going in here. So once in a while, I convince my wife, and I use this feed and wax. It's a beeswax with an orange oil, and a lot of these were, I forgot what they mix up wax and let it dissolve, which works out really well. But it allows the oil to go into the surface, replenishes some of the wood, and really brings out the luster. No, it does not, but it's just a nice, the oil will evaporate and the wax will stay on the surface. The oil will penetrate in some through that finish. Because we have an oil finish, it's not completely hardened. So it allows it to go in there and penetrate that wood again. Again, oil's not, it stabilizes the wood, it protects it, keeps it from warping, but it's not the ultimate protection. So let's go into shellacs. The last time I used shellac, we were going through this, the first time that I used it was 1971, and I used it on a box that I built checkers in junior high school. That was my experience with shellac. The other experience would be when I did house remodel and we replaced moldings and everybody got 5-pound orange shellac to match the woodwork. So there's a lot of different shellacs, crystals that you dissolve first. It's a great finish for a lot of different things. Joe uses shellac. I don't know anybody else does, but he uses it to seal the back of his bowl. So when he's doing his dyes, we don't get runoff. I just rather just hit a spray can and throw it in there and let it go and let the lacquer do what it has to. I know people that use shellac when you're staining and you want the end grain slightly sealed, so some of the stain still goes into the end grain. But if you stain end grain before, it darkens that wood really bad. So by using a little bit of shellac on there, you can keep the color even. So I apologize. I'm leaving the shellac out there as a finish that you can use. There's different color flakes that'll add an amber color to a white color on your surface. But understand it's an alcohol-based finish, which is kind of friendlier. Alcohol smells good. But again, not a real durable finish. What they use a lot of shellac on, it does a great fence polish. So when people that are doing the pepper mills in that aspect, if you get used to French polishing on your lathe, you can do an absolutely gorgeous finish on that. And that'll be applied with a rag by patting and slowly building up the finish. And since alcohol evaporates very quickly, you can build up that finish very quickly. It's a soft finish, so you can pretty much buff it with steel wool and or Scotch-Brite in very fine sandpaper until you get the finish you want, and it polishes very nice. Then we got varnish. We slightly touch base on the varnish with the tongue oils and the oil finish. They put a heavier dryers into the varnish so we can build it up very quickly. The thing about varnish is, one, you never shake the can because you get all air bubbles in it. And secondly, you have to apply it two ways. And this is only by experience. One, a sponge brush very carefully, or a badger hair brush. The badger hair brush is actual badger hair, and it's made for varnishing. And you'll lie it down and ply it, and it gets bubble free. Whereas the sponge brush will give it some bubbles, but you have to kind of break the bubbles and let it flow. I had a lot of experience with Captain Spar varnish doing boat work on mahogany rails. And when we finished that, they were 90 sheen and they're absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of oils in varnish. So you get that penetration in the wood, locks in pretty nice, but UV protection is not that good. So if you're out in the sun and you're exposed to sun, some of the weather, it will break down. And UV protection. The question is about UV protection. You can go with a finish that has high UV, which is usually a catalyzed finish. We'll be talking that. When I was buying flooring for my house, I have natural maple. And when this is going to be off base a little bit, but when I'm looking for flooring, I take a coin and I scratch into the wood. I didn't even scratch that much, I dented it. If you do bare flooring, you'll take off the whole finish and peel it right off. I do the same thing for kitchen cabinets because you can bring in some foreign cabinets from China and the finish flakes right off. So the floor I have, you can't scratch the fishes, has high UV protection. But if I lift up my rug where the floor is covered, you'll see a color difference. Where you really want to watch out is your exotic woods. Padauk is one of them. I had one piece in an art gallery and they put that Padauk bowl right in the front window and it looked like ebonized mahogany. It was black as black. You lift up the bowl and you look at orange. So the exotics react a lot more to sunlight. Maple will definitely darken. Walnut might even light sunlight because it bleaches it out. I don't think there's any finish that will prevent it. That's where you start staining the wood, keep that color in. And then you have to look at color fast dyes and the stain that won't react to sun. So we're going to go into lacquers. Lacquer is a soft finish, easy to use, and deft is absolutely wonderful. One, it's a clear finish, has a lot of sanding bodies in it. You can put a big coat on that and then sand away, put another coat on, but it's a very soft finish. So if you're using it in a bowl and it's starting to be a fruit dish and stuff like that, it's going to look like hell in 6 months just because the finish is soft. So then they start going into more of a, this is a pre-cat lacquer. So I mean by pre-cat, this has already been catalyzed. So we can build this up, and catalyst hardens the product. So it allows you to build it up, build up a stronger product, protects the wood more. The problem with lacquers, again, is nail polish. It'll just start eating into that. So how durable you want your bowl, and then how do you want to refresh it afterwards, everything along those, there's a fine line in that. I'm lost on water-based finishing. Rick Reinbrenner, his stellar platter from the Wayne Art Center. Did you take second and best show? He used a water-based finish. The finish was absolutely gorgeous. Water-based doesn't change the color of the wood. It keeps it that maple, bright white, doesn't have the oils that change the color of the wood. In its molecular structure bonds to the wood and really makes a permanent barrier. I don't use them. I have a problem waiting for stuff to dry. I don't like, I'm too much in a hurry. Rick sits back, takes a cup of coffee, makes it beautiful. And if I needed to have a platter or something where I needed to have it bright white, I'm going to have to go to a water base to keep that true color. Lacquers, usually you can get a water white lacquer. Urethanes always tend to move things yellow because of the oils that they have in there. You can't get a urethane that's water white. You can get a water white lacquer. So back to catalyzed finish, it's two parts. You put a hardener in the product itself. Once you mix that up, you have a shelf life, usually days. So you have to you mix up a small batch, you apply it, and if you can have something to keep going, but other than that, after 2 days, product's gone. You're throwing it away. So you mix it up in small batches, but it's a very, very, very durable finish. My dining room table was sprayed 89, something like that. I use a finish called Crystal. Campbell makes that one. If you get a drip, you have to use a file because sandpaper won't cut it. And the finish looks absolutely stellar right now. Never touched it. So catalyzed finish is great for tabletops. Great for bowls, because if you want to build up a finish and everything along those lines works out well. This is done in a catalyzed finish. I sprayed it after. And the inside is also, and I just poured it in so it fill up the end grain on the bottom. So that's about what I got for clear finishes. Oh, I have catalyzed sanding sealer and top coat. I'm going to show you an example here, which is a catalyzed 90 sheen. When I flip this over, when we go finishing to finishing, I'm going to sand it down and then I'm going to buff it. So it builds up solids in a catalyzed finish out of a spray gun is anywhere from 30 to 38% solids versus 8. So all of a sudden you can build the coats up. If you want that high, deep luster, the best to show at Wayne Art Center, the finish on his was a really nice buildup. I don't know if he used a lacquer or catalyzed finish, but he had a really nice high gloss build up of finish. If you're using lacquer, you're probably putting on 20 coats. You're going to start with 5, sand it, build up another 5, sand it, and you just can't do that. You're going to do 5, let it sit for 3-4 days, go back and sand it, build up another 5, let it set for 3 or 4 days, do it again. And so it's a little slower process, but even with the catalyzed finish, I could probably do 2-3 coats, let it sit for 2 weeks, and then do it again. A catalyzed finish, the one I use, totally cures in 28 days. So you can handle it the next day, it still is not cured. Advanced colors. Question was is if I do put anything back on the lathe after it finished. So we're going to play here, and you guys are going to do this with me because I've never done this on a bowl. I've done it on some flat work, but so we have this copper bowl. This was not very exciting. It was sycamore, if I remember correctly. You know, it has a hole in it, little bark still in it. So I did this last night and painted it up. This is old metals or modern masters. You can get these finishes. I think Packard is doing it, Woodworkers Catalog. I think you can still get this stuff at Rockler and Woodcraft. You see some of the people that do the bowls that look like they're rusted and aged along this one. So we're going to do this color with copper. Modern Masters. It is a water base, latex. I had to put a primer base coat on this and then brushed it with copper. And they suggest 2 layers of copper, but there's 2 ways we could do this. I could redo this whole thing in copper again and then spray it down. Or I'm just going to accent certain areas of this and then let the acid change the color of the copper. So I won't get my hands painted. So thinking that the water runs downhill, I'm going to hit this edge. Again, how do you apply? I'm using a brush. A pad here. I don't want to cover up all the copper on this. I want to give it an aged look. Like I said, I've never done this on a bowl before. I'm hoping that I got the right canister and it's not just Windex. They basically say the heavier put on the paint, better you That's why you do 2 gloves. Accentuate the crack right there. Okay. They give you a solution that reacts to the copper. This is actually copper impregnated paint. In copper, they have two different colors. You can go green or you can go blue. And I think this one's blue. Hopefully. Or I just sprayed it with Windex. We'll let that do its thing. So right now, hopefully, changes color. Only reacts with the wet paint. So I'm hoping I get this green modeling, blue modeling all over it. Same paint, except for the base. The primer is a red, seals up everything. If that doesn't look good, I grab the Windex. We'll see. I see some in there. Okay, so I'm going to set this. So we going through here and Jimmy Clue's colors in his rims. This is definitely a Jimmy Clue style with the OG bottom, the rim in here, and colored out. When we start doing these, and this is where Joe uses his shellac, we prep this back side and we have to seal it up because aniline dye runs all over the place. So once you color this, then you cut out the center. This is a little sharp here and I got some chipping there. Again, I was doing this really quick. So the one thing about aniline dye, it brings out the color. How many people use aniline dye here? Okay, quite a few. Nice, nice. There's no finish on that bowl. You can thin out the aniline dye. These are artesian. They're supposed to be color fast with light. Put it on there, and it makes that curly maple just jump. That's great. Looks good. You're going to put a clear coat over that. I want a little more depth on that. So I'm going to take a dark base. I thought I had black. Do this purple right here. Women love purple, right? Let that dry for a few seconds. And the thing about aniline dye, it penetrates very easily. Now I'm going to put the red on it. And all of a sudden, you got a totally different look. It highlighted the curls of the maple, changed the whole look of that curl, gives it two dimensions. And again, we have a totally new look. So between the yellow, dark, and the red versus solid red. builds up different layers of color and changes the whole look. So even on this red, if you don't want the real dark background, all of a sudden we have a really nice orange with red highlights. The hard part about this is like play. This bowl had little cutoffs here and there that allows you to play with those colors. And you experiment, you can come up with some really wild stuff. So even with these little blocks, I started playing with these. If you get a little bit on the color wheel and know which direction you're going, I love green. That bowl has a green lid. So I'll start out with a blue base. You could do anything you want. These trans tints right here, they're not as color fast as the artesians. But even at this, almost all, this can go water or alcohol. I like alcohol for the simple fact, and you can see how much I put it. This delay kills me. So you can see how much I have in there. Throw a little alcohol in there. Stir it around. This one. This is a green. So that's washed out. Yeah, I could do a wash with this one. If I use more of a green in here. Use that real bluish green. Again, a lot of colors to play with. But you can see the depth by adding different colors in there. Makes things pop. Really brings out the grain. A lot of times people like to do black, then add your colors on top of that so we get the black solution. I kind of like the red and yellow because I'm an orange fan. I really like that blue right there. So along with these aniline dyes, who does wood burning on some of their pieces? One of the things for coloring is these Prismacolors. And they're basically the same color as the aniline dye. It allows you to draw smiley faces on your wood and it colors it in. So what happens is if you wood burn and you leave those openings, that allows you to dye your wood. Wood's porous again. So the reason why I'm saying about wood burning, it cauterizes all the grain or veins within the wood. So allowing that'll stop this color from running. So I always have some of these I forgot to bring my apple where I colored the leaves green, and that works out real easy to accent out. How's our copper bowl doing? Guess I should pour that stuff out. So the copper bowl is starting to turn color. It ran down the sides real nice, and the center is looking pretty good. So all in all, except for my thumbprint right there, this might be kind of exciting. So this is the first time I did it on a bowl. Please forgive me. But as you can see, let it play. I mean, this was an ugly bowl. It sat in my bench last 2.5 years, just sitting there. So I thought this would be a good place to play, give a little experiment on it. Oh yeah, it's wet as all can be. Now, one thing on this, where you see this copper, you have to use a water-based finish. I used a lacquer on it, makes it disappear. If you use a polycryl, just keeps it as green can be. So there's one place where I use a water-based finish because it's all water-based to begin with. The Artisan. And as you can see, I have a bunch of colors. Airbrushing this, I've gone through and highlighted the colors and added it with airbrushing. And then you could spritz alcohol on it to blend the colors. I've been doing more of the undercoat, sand it, and build up so we have a little more depth on the color. Finishing the finish. Well, I just put all this finish on. What do you mean, finishing the finish? Well, you have a couple of choices here, but we need to clean it up. Oil alone, great, but there's a thing about buffing out your finish and making it look beautiful. I won't tell you where this was. This is, veneer is English sycamore. English sycamore is quarter sawn curly maple, but they call it English sycamore. This was sprayed with a 90 sheen. I don't know if I pick up the sheen off the. They did a very, this is where they should have came back. They wanted this glass smooth and should have been, it should have been sanded and sprayed again to build it up, to build the mirror coat. So this has some voids in it. You can see the ripples in it, everything. So we're going to smooth it out a little bit. We're going to see if we can make this work too. 1,500. 6-inch flat pad. So I shouldn't be dipping in anything into this. I'm trying to get a little flatter surface without burning through. Oh, I should have taken more. Not getting the flats as much as I like. I apologize for the noise. This is a catalyzed finish on here. So it takes a lot of abuse. And this has been sprayed almost 2 years ago. Right about now, when I'm looking at this, this is where I'd recoat it with another spray, let it sit 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then buff it from there. So this is a fully catalyzed finish. I'm sanding it, and I'm leaving this side so you can kind of see what was there. And of course, everybody uses the be-all system, right? Everybody wonders how you get a wide platter. So you extend it out. And you extend it out more. So you can go as far as you want. Okay. Safety first. Don't need a wire hanging out, or a buffer can grab it. Secondly, it's cotton fibers. The lint is extremely nasty for your lungs. The mask will work really well because it picks up a lot of, if you notice, if you polish the metal, it goes black. Yeah, because what it's going to, the question is, he polished metal with his buffing wheels. And if you do that, you'll find out, again, this is picking up product, especially from the metal, and it's big corrosion. So what's going to do is just dump it right into the grain, and you're going to have black marks in your wood. This one's Triple E. How do I prep my wheels? I've gone through, yes, sandpaper. I've used a file, so it's just straight. Most of the time, I don't even worry about it. Shame on me. I burnt the finish. So we could be just a little too aggressive on that. Again, this is the thing, all that trial and error stuff. White diamond I usually just use as a cleaning wheel. Yeah, I could have got away with just the white diamond. Now, carbonuba wax has a very high temperature to melt. So what's applying this is actually the friction. Make sure you don't run off an edge. Cotton fibers causes a little static. Again, I hurried, but you can see buffing out the finish gives you that high gloss. And that was done at a 90 sheen on the one side. So by buffing it, getting rid of the oxidation, everything along those lines, polishes it up real nice.
Tom, we have a question online. It says, about what speed are you turning on the lathe? It says, I know if you go too slow, it doesn't do a great job, but fast makes the wheel real hard.
I want to be about 1500. And again, pressure has a lot to do with it, and the finish that you apply. Go back to this triple E. Oil finish. I might have put wax in it. I can literally see the old finish peeling off. Being this is oil, I'm literally burning that surface and burnishing it. I thought the finish was a little flat on this one, so I don't mind taking this one off. Rockler, Woodcraft, Packard, these are all be-all system. 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Another question, Tom,
Yes, sir.
is What preferred source of high quality wax do you recommend?
Carnauba wax works very well. It is really just straight carnauba. So it's strictly a friction applied. I'll show you when I get the wax wheel back on, but I can take my fingernail and polish my fingernail real nice, get a coat of wax on. Again, this wheel is here to clean. I won't be putting as much pressure on. I just want to clean the surface. Right here, you'll see where some of the finish I didn't burn off. Again, this wax is super hard. I'm not applying any wax on that nail by rubbing on it. I have to get this friction on here, apply the wax to it. Again, I'm going to go light here to get the wax to apply. I don't have to do anything more than just apply the wax.
Another question from the Zoom. The arbor you're using with the wheels, is that from Beal or another vendor? I like it better than trying to compete with the 3 wheels on the long arbor.
I don't know where I got these wheels. The blue part. Yeah, I know. I did get them at Woodcraft. Craft Supply has them also. In trying to deal with 3 wheels, especially when you start doing a big old platter, I mean, you got to get in there. When you have 3 wheels all lined up, that's great for a pen, but we start playing with platters or anything like that, you need the extended arm. Now, I don't know what was applied after that. I know I put a lot of oil on it, but you could see, yeah, you can see where I cut through here, and see there's some leftover residue there. And I burned that top surface off. Sadistic. It was such a nice platter too. It needed, it was dull. I kind of like the gloss finish that was in there. So let's see our copper bowl here. Copper in there. So you can see we got runs down the side, and the inside looks pretty interesting. This bowl right here. We had a person here for a demo, and we did this on their Saturday let class. What you do is you turn very thin. You do the outside in a base coat of aniline dye, and then you go on the inside and you do an acetone drip of color. The acetone runs right through the end grain, and it makes these great patterns and a great look. We went through a gallon of acetone that Saturday. And my heart palpitated for 2 days. Not recommended. If you plan to do something like this, do it outside, under a shade tree with a breeze. And I make sure you wear rubber gloves because acetone is whatever that word is, causes cancer. Nasty stuff. Don't recommend it, but it's a great look. But you have extremely thin, and I haven't done another one since, just because of that. My little pumpkin here. I picked this piece of wood off the table one day. It was a piece of camphor, and talk about something that smells up your shop. It was killer. Loved it. Sinuses were clear. So I use a air file with a Bosch cutter, and it cuts very clean lines. I use blue aniline dye in the mouth and everything, and then orange, reddish yellow in the there to color it orange. The wife displays it on this 8 months out of the year, and right around Halloween, she turns it around. The eggplant here, I used 2 colors again. You'll see some yellow streaks in here, along with the purple, and then of course the green top, and I'll even add yellow into the green top. Again, adding a variety of colors in this adds to the depth and the realistic stuff. We did this demo, I forgot when we did this, last year sometime. I never dated it. This is a yarn bowl, so your string comes up there. Everybody sees it, thinks it's a birdhouse. It's already warped. What I want to do on this is milk paint. That's a whole nother animal. Kinkle. Is it Karen Kinkle or something like that? I forgot her name. She does milk paint better than anybody. If you ever have a chance to see her, her milk paint ability is unbelievable. So milk paint, you're going to apply it, and it's plaster with a color in it. So it's almost cement. So it's very hard. And you're going to layer it. You're going to start out with, I'm going to say maybe a yellow, then add a green, do a purple on top of that. And you slowly build up layers of color. You have to still do this on the lathe. Then when you're spinning, you're going to burnish through the layers. So all of a sudden, this is going to have different colors between layers in the top part, and it looks phenomenal. She does 3-legged stools where she does a lot of ornate legs, doing the milk paint on there, and then burnishing through the color. And it's a great look. You need to experiment. Yes, Mike. I don't know it for certain, but you can see her on a lot of, if you go to the AAW magazine, you'll see her listed in the back at a lot of demos. She does some beautiful work. Hopefully, we've brought this to giving you a little more knowledge of what you can do for your finish. This is the icing, not the bowl. And a lot of times people have questions about finish and what to do with it. How can I do this? There's a famous term out there, brown and round. So you look at the table and they're brown and round. So this gives you an opportunity to add a little color. Play. Grab a piece of scrap wood, grab a couple dye colors, magic markers, anything of those lines, and play. Have fun. Thank you all.